that women are there thinking this is just about what I can bring to the table. I mean, we're at work, right? And or civic meeting or whatever it is. And as it turns out, there's this whole other agenda going on. There's a whole other thought process, which is, I think, why we're still struggling with things that to me make no sense whatsoever, like sexual harassment. Really? I mean, once you've been told that that's a problem, you still can't get it together. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like you're at work. Why are you thinking about that? Which is a big piece, I think, of why not talking about that, Dennis. And I'm so glad we're able to do that with you. Not talking about that doesn't help that at all, because one of the things that we have to realize is that if you do not talk about it in the way that you should, the real way that you should, it doesn't end up getting resolved. Okay. It ends up getting resolved. And I graduated from law school 50 years ago this year. And I can remember, bless their hearts, I love my classmates, but I can remember, or even in undergraduate school where I did a report in my non-statistical methods of research course in men having extramarital liaisons. And one of the questions that men told me to ask was whether it was possible for a man to just be friends with a female. And I didn't understand that question. And when I got to law school, I understood it a bit more because I'm just there to study the law. Okay, that's all that's on my mind. I mean, occasionally I might be able to do something else, but I mean, basically that's it. And as it turns out, somebody says, okay, well, all the guys got together and we decided that you need to, like wear dresses more because we want to see your legs. And I'm like, what the hell do my legs have to do with anything? We're all here just studying the law. Like, seriously? And that idea of being taken seriously as a female who's just dealing with the law just shouldn't have been that much of a struggle. I mean, I just kind of had to put it out of my head all the time, but it really is a real thing. And if you think about it, that, and as well as the kind of ideas we have about other people that are not like us, end up being so much of what undermines the whole concept of DEI, the inability, which is what you got from metaphysics, the inability to be able to see people for who they truly are, as opposed to what society has acculturated you to see them as. Men are acculturated to see women as sexual objects. They can clean it up, but the truth is that's always a part of the equation for them. If you think about some of the situations that have been the more prominent ones, the looks of the females have been a part of what was on the table for folks in high positions. And it just, that way. The guys don't, it doesn't matter how they look, but for the females, you got to be good looking in order to present yourself. First thing, president, just the other day, the president said about somebody was that they were good looking. She was a good looking female. It's like, what are you talking about? We are in a high level political meeting. Why is that even an issue? Why is it on your head?
Benjamin Watson is a former NFL tight end, as well as an author, a speaker, and an advocate. A Bart Star Award winner, two-time Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, and Super Bowl champion during his 16 seasons, he is now a college football studio analyst with the SEC Network, VP of Strategic Relationships with Human Coalition, and Director of Football for Pro Athletes Outreach. Benjamin's uncanny ability to objectively and eloquently address controversial subjects has placed him on major TV networks, such as NBC's Good Morning America, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, the Christian Broadcasting Network, and The Dr. Phil Show. Benjamin also speaks at special events held by schools, churches, and conferences around the country. Benjamin also collaborates with the International Justice Mission, an organization at the forefront of the battle against sex trafficking. Together, they join forces on various events and projects. The Just Life with Benjamin Watson is a thought-provoking podcast exploring what it means to live a life rooted in justice, faith, and human dignity. Each episode features candid conversations with leaders, thinkers, and everyday heroes who are confronting injustice and building a more equitable world. Justice is not just a moment, it is a lifestyle. Benjamin's passion for football mirrors his passion for giving back. Recognizing the abundance of blessings in their lives, Benjamin and his wife Kirsten started a nonprofit named the Watson 7 Foundation. This foundation is committed to creating charitable initiatives, cultivating meaningful partnerships, and channeling their passion to strengthen families. We are so happy that you're joining us today, Benjamin. Let's get started. everyone. We are so happy you're here. It is another opportunity to dive into DEI and what it all means, what it does to this narrative that we're having right now in our country, as well as individually and as collectively as groups. So we are here to get started with our latest guest. His name is Benjamin Watson. He is probably someone you know as a Super Bowl winner, also a author. He's got a huge, beautiful, wonderful, magnificent family that is part of his forefront of his ideas of how to move through society with what you've learned, what you're learning, and how to put that into some future act. So we want to welcome to our Quilted Chats, Benjamin Watson. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. Hey, of course. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to reconnect and have this important conversation. So thanks for hosting me today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting to get to talk to you and to talk about what we set out to do here, which is to discuss what the DEI has to do with NFL, being an author, being the voice of tomorrow, today, yesterday. And let's get to it. Let's go straight to your
Can I say hello? Can I?
Oh, sure. All right.
Yes, my student. He took employment law from me at the University of Georgia, and I was blissfully happy in 2015 to see that Benjamin, who had gone off into the NFL, I taught both him and his wife, Kirsten, and I saw that he had written this book. And I immediately ordered it as soon as I read that the book was there and thought, oh my gosh, my students need to read this. And it just so happened that Benjamin was coming to the Terry College of Business to give a talk soon after that. And we saw each other there in the chapel where you were getting ready to give the talk. And we sat there chatting for the longest time. And I said to you, Benjamin, that book was awesome. It is so awesome until I'm really thinking about making it a required reading for my course. And he said, you will do that? And I said, Benjamin, you took this class from me. You know what that class is like. This book would fit in perfectly with that. And let me tell you, you know this, Benjamin, I don't play when it comes to my classes. I don't care how good a friend you are. If it's not something that I think would enhance the learning for those students, it's not going to be there. Yeah. Yours was perfect. And I need all of y'all to know, this is a copy of the book. Okay? That is, and I don't want you to miss this part. These little pieces of paper I have stuck in there, and it's, I've made notes all through it because the reason I knew, and this is why we have you on today, the reason I knew that this was an awesome read for the students, I sort of figured they wouldn't mind reading it. Well, nobody likes an assigned reading, right? Yeah. But especially a whole book. And I had guided questions for them, but I knew they wouldn't mind it because it was somebody they felt like they knew because you had gone to the University of Georgia. Mm. But at the same time, I am so particular about that class because I know that people will take what they get out of that class and go out into the world and not only use it, but give it to other people. And what I need is for them to have a way to think about these things. They're going to problem solve, but I need a way for the rest of their lives for them to be able to think about these issues when they see them so that they understand them in a way that they can not only use them, but give them over to other people. Your book did such an incredible job of doing that because just like in class, we don't take one view because we know there are at least two sides to every story. Yeah. There's my side and then there's your side, actually three, and then there's the truth. Right? Yes, and you did such an excellent job of dealing with the issues really legitimately. And you didn't pull any punches, but you were balanced in dealing with them. And the reason for me that was the more admirable was because of what created this book in the first place, which was you coming off of that Monday night football game and Kirsten telling you what the grand jury had done with that case in Ferguson, Missouri, where they failed to indict that police officer for killing that yet another unarmed teenager. And you were so upset about that. You didn't even know what to do with it. You ended up creating on your phone in your notes a Facebook post that you then ended up having posted, and in just a matter of days, it had almost 1 million views, over 800,000 views. It really resonated with people. And you had to think before you ever put that out there about whether you should put that out there. And you talk about God in your book and his role in all of this. And you were sort of hesitant about whether you should do that or not. And as it turns out, it so resonated with people, and it resonated with my students the same way. They thought, and this is, I love this part. One of the things I did was that it was an assignment. They had to turn in their response to the book with these guided questions that I had given them. They did not realize that you and I knew each other, and that I was thinking about whether I should do this. But after they turned in the papers, I asked them if it would be okay to send them to you. Because I know as an author, you put stuff out there, but you really don't know where it goes and what's going to happen with it and how people feel about it. You know, a few may trickle through and send you an email, but these were whole classes reading this. So everybody was willing to do that. And I said, you know, I'm taking off the names, and they were like, okay, I don't want you to take off my name. I want you to know I read.
Well, it was amazing those papers. So, like, I remember you sending me those, the manila envelope with all these papers in it. And first of all, I got a lot of respect for teachers because they got to read through all these papers. They have to constructive criticism. And I was looking at some of them, and I was like, man, there's just so many. You got to sit there and read all that stuff. But it was so honoring, flattering. I still can't believe that my book was in like a college course at the University of Georgia. And so
not just a college course. Okay, let's be real clear here.
Well, I'm just saying, period. But much less your course, because
the most popular course in the college.
Which is true. And you're not just saying that.
No, I'm not just saying that.
And if I could roll it back a little bit, I remember hearing about your course. I think Kirsten told me about it. About the course, and I didn't know like how that was going to fit into, because we were both in Terry, obviously business majors. I was finance, she was marketing, and I didn't really know what the course was about. But everybody across campus is like, if you can take Dr. BA's course, you got to take a course. It's the best course on campus. I don't care what your major is, you got to take this course. And so it's almost like a lottery trying to get into this course. And so we get into the course, and as I look back, it was my most favorite course because of the discussions that we had about tough topics. And one thing you taught us to do was, while you had there's a framework for right and wrong, and we see things through a certain lens, and there are some things that are just plain black and white, obviously, when it comes to the law. But you taught us to kind of like a golfer, and I don't golf, but I did go to the Masters, and I saw these golfers like stand on one place looking at the putt, then they would walk around to the other side and look at the putt, then they would put the finger in the air and see what the wind is, and they would look at all these different angles. And what you taught us to do in that class was not necessarily what was right and what's wrong, but how to think, like how to think about these things that are so important. And even as it relates to this current conversation about DEI and affirmative action, all those sorts of things, like, so many of us, we have a linear thinking, and that's positive. Again, we're going to arrive at different places many times. But I think the compassion side of it comes in when we understand the different points of views and the different on-ramps that people have to the current crisis. Yes. And so even in reading some of the papers that you sent me, a lot of them say, I'm glad we're doing this course. I'm glad I had to read the book. I never thought about it this way. I grew up in this place. My parents said this. I thought this. Benjamin brought this up. Dr. B.A. brought this up in class. I met a girl recently. I was speaking somewhere, and she came up to me, and she graduated several years ago, but she told me that she took your class. I forget her name, but that it really, really impacted her taking the class and reading the book. And she was just grateful because it opened her eyes to a whole world that she never would have even entered into if she had not taken your class and not been presented with the opportunity to engage with that text. So I thank you for, I remember when you first told me that you were going to make it require reading, and I told Kirsten, I was like, you're not going to believe this, but I think it's fake. If you wouldn't have sent me those papers, I probably
What? Oh my God, it was so perfect for that. And you could tell by the students' reactions to those papers. Yeah. And I think one of the things you said is just so incredibly important. And this is why I'm so specific about what I will allow to be something required in my course. If you don't come at it the right way, it's not going to resonate with people. They're not going to hear you. And that was probably the one thing that stood out more than anything else for students, right? Because you're talking about the University of Georgia. It's the flagship university of the state of Georgia, which is a southern state with a history, right, that is still very much with us today, although they've made great improvements. And the truth is, it's just like asking you what you do at Christmas. I mean, you probably do what the measure of what your parents did, because that's what you were used to growing up. And it's the same way. We pass down attitudes about people, about situations, about race that they don't even think twice about. When it's Christmas time, we go get a tree. Okay. Black folk, this is what you think about them. White folks, this is what you think about them. And they never think about it until they get into a situation like that class, and we start talking about it. Your book, if it came at them a very different way, I don't care who you were and whether you had gone to the university or not, if it came at them a different way, they would not have heard you. That's what I love about that book. It is chock full of just enormously impactful information, but it's also delivered in a way that makes it so people can take it in. And I don't care how good your stuff is. If people can't hear you on it, then it's meaningless. And that was another piece of why I thought it was such a good thing to bring to the class. Telling them the law, even through really interesting cases and discussions, is one thing. You added another layer by being somebody who was admired, somebody that they thought, you were in the NFL. I mean, that was a big deal coming from the University of Georgia, even though we have lots of those folks. People really respect them a lot. So they're thinking you got it made. And then you tell them your story and how life is for you as somebody who they think has it made. And if that was not their background, they would have no reason to think that you were operating with what you were operating with. They would just think, oh, he's in the NFL, he's making a whole bunch of money, he's rich, he's famous, all of this. And it's like, no, maybe if you're white, that's what you're walking with. But I'm not. And this is what it's like for me, which is not some lamentation. It's not, oh, woe is me, I got all this money and y'all treat me like people. It's not that at all. The reality of the situation. And that's what I think really, really hit them. And why the student would say what she said to you, because that just wasn't their reality. And unless you had told them that, they just simply would not have known. And then once you know, you can't unknow.
Exactly. And also, it's really just, it's about storytelling, but it's also about taking advantage of, cultural inflection points. And that was an inflection point in our nation, much like, the murder of George Floyd in 2020, when the entire nation is silent and everybody's on their phones because we're all quarantined or whatever, social distancing, not able to go out, and those things happen. And then you see, somewhat of the same type of a, awakening, so to speak. We have so many of those every 5, 6, 10 years. But when it came to race in this country, there was great vigilance in correcting, or at least addressing and hearing some of what had been wrong. We've seen, I think, a swing back in a lot of ways over the last, 3, years or so. Definitely the narrative has shifted backward because America many times gets fatigued with racial progress. And unfortunately, we've seen that throughout our nation's history, that there's always kind of these ebbs and flows when it comes to equality, or at least even speaking about some of these things. And I think that the danger that we're in right now is that, unlike the conversations in your classroom, there's a lot of polarization, a lot of tribalisms, and people aren't able to hear anything out of their own echo chamber. And that's dangerous. That's why classes like what you had, especially when it comes to young people, it's important for them to have those types of encounters, because when you get out of that setting, many people are only hearing what they want to hear.
That is amazing. Renee, don't you love his language? Isn't it just so inclusive? That's why your book is so good. He said it so nicely, right, that we have this, sort of change of attitudes in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's true. But even that, you said in a balanced way. You were very gracious about it. But I think, and let me read you this. This is a wonderful piece that you had. You
balance
said,
without being both siding.
Yes. And in the email, and I should say this to people, and maybe we'll put a link to your book in the description, and probably Renee will put a link, if it's still up, to your Facebook post.
Absolutely.
but you basically took your post and embellished it, put more in there, sort of pumped it up for a book because it had resonated with so many people. And this is, I think, one of the most profound ways that you addressed what was going on, because it was a really awful reaction when that non-indictment came back, right? People started rioting all over. In fact, your dad said he hadn't seen it like that since the 60s. And you gave several different things of how you felt instead of trying to put it all into one. It's like, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, whatever. And you said, I'm angry because systemic prejudice and bias, though just as real in our time as in Pop's time, because you had talked about your granddad, have become crutches for young people today and excuses for underachieving. I'm angry because the brooding hate that paces the streets of a small town is a cowardice that leads nowhere. It's cowardly because you can do better, achieve more, and rise above, but you're afraid to try. It leads nowhere because it never accomplishes anything. It doesn't lead to pride or respect or opportunity. It just leads to destruction. And you had talked about the rioting being sort of problematic because it was only hurting us. And my fear about what you said is that that part ends up taking over because people not only have lived in a society which does not reflect anything positive back to them, which is what you had talked about, the importance of things like statutes and heroes being, you being able to see yourself in a space that you can aspire to. But if you add to that, and, they're putting back up the statues that they had taken down before now, right? Yeah. And if you add to that this attitude that you talked about, this change of heart that we've seen over, or at least expressions, okay, because evidently the heart was there the whole time. We just didn't see it, and now they're expressing it. When you add that to this sort of feeling that had already come out about how much, especially young Black men, thought they could achieve, and you add to that the idea of how people are feeling so polarized now and thinking that it's okay to have these retro attitudes about who belongs where in society, it seems like it would just lead us back down a road that just, I'm not sure who wants to go there other than these people who are coming out with these polarizing ideas. Like, why would you want that back? Why wouldn't you want people, and this is a big piece of what you talked about that resonated so much with you with your granddad, his idea that you can only, if you're Black, you can only go this high and no higher. You're just going to have a ceiling on this. And you felt like he lived up to that ceiling, right? Whatever that ceiling was, he was going to take advantage of it between his golfing and Cadillacs and stuff like that. But here, it seems like you don't even, that ceiling is being lowered so that you don't even have the same ceiling you had, like, except when he was young, and growing up in Virginia. And they totally, in fact, drained the pool when he got in, the public pool, and sent a bill to his parents for the cost of it because it was a time of Jim Crow. Yeah. And when you think about the attitude changes, it's like we're going back to that. Yeah. Especially when you think about what you said about church still being the most segregated time in America, 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. 8 out of 10 churches are predominantly one race.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there. I don't even know where to start.
And this is yours. This is what you realize.
I don't even know where to start. But, I think that we have to deal in realities as much as we want to deal with emotions. I think emotions are important. I wrote that book based on my emotions. This is how I was feeling. I think it's important to identify your feelings and to expound on those and to recognize those. But also, it's also always important to see where progress has been made. I think this country has seen great progress in areas when it comes to race and an opportunity. But there are some things, as you mentioned, that have not changed. The Color of Law. I know you've read that book. It's a phenomenal book by Richard Rothstein. And it talks so much about how the law, the programs, the policies enacted by this government of the United States have created the segregation residentially that we see right now. So churches are segregated, yes, well, primarily because neighborhoods are segregated, just the same way the schools are still segregated. This is a manifestation of people simply wanting to live apart. It's because the laws have made it that way. And even if a law has been removed, you had things like restrictive covenants that kept homeowners from selling to certain people, selling to Black people. And so the landscape we see right now is is on purpose. America is working as it was designed to work. Now, the onus is on us as citizens to perhaps try to do something different, as difficult as that may be. I think that, for Black people, there's always this you'll hear a lot of people say that, there's a victim mentality or something. I don't ascribe to that. I don't believe in it. I believe in identifying where people have been victimized, correcting it, and also understanding that I can talk about the victimization historically and presently of Black people and Black men while still saying at the same time, I want to achieve the highest heights. Like I got four little boys. We will talk about and have talked about Black history in our house. We have talked about convict leasing. We have talked about the history of Jim Crow. We've talked about the fact that banks presently will not loan money to Black people when they see your name and they think that it's Black. These are very real things that are happening right now.
And let me just say, this isn't negative stuff. This isn't bringing anything down. This is just telling your children the reality of the world they're in.
But the beauty of being a complex human being is that while I know these things are true, while I know that, prejudice happens still interpersonally, they've witnessed it, they've seen it. I've had people say things about my kids' hair before, white folks. We can also at the same time identify that, man, there are a lot of great opportunities. I'm going to encourage you to achieve. Yeah. You get your education. You realize that you deal with people not as a monolith, but try to deal with people as individuals. All them people ain't bad.
Even in the context of the systemic, really it was racism that brought it about. But the systemic discrimination that's happening, sort of the big picture, there's still the individuals within that. And you can hate the system, try to do what you can to impact that, but still understand that people are people and you got to take each one individually.
You do it. And that's difficult. Just being honest. Like sometimes I want to be like us and them. I wrote this out in the book. I said, sometimes I feel it's us against them. Like you, and honestly, if you watch enough cable news and you get on social media as much, as I do sometimes, and you see some of the things that are out there and how many people are liking certain things that are just outright discriminatory, racist, you'll think that it's all of them and it's all of us. But that's never been true. It's never been true throughout.
Benjamin, tell them this story, because what you said is so incredibly, to me, it's so impactful because it deals with each person in their own walk, right? Because people are always like, what can I do? What can I do? This is individual stuff. This is what I call hard work. Okay, you have to do this. And it's stuff to do on both sides. And I love the story where you talked about the person, as it turns out, who had been at UGA with you, who came up to you after a talk and apologized for something they had said when you were both student leaders. And as it turns out, your facial reaction to it really made that person feel like they had done something really wrong. And as it turns out, you all were interpreting it two totally different ways. And it's perfect because your way made perfect sense given the history that you're talking about and what you were dealing with all the time. Theirs made perfect sense dealing with what they wwere talking about and the world they had lived in all the time. And it was all these years later that
I want you, Dr. B.A., because you read the book more recent than I have, to expound on that. Because I remember the story, but I'm forgetting details.
What happened was when you were a student, because people used to always assume that you were always dealing with only being there because of athleticism, as opposed to you were a top level student. You were in the College of Business. Okay? You were in basket weaving somewhere. You were in the Terry College of Business. And you were so used to a lifetime. You had gone to a predominantly white school. You had gone to Duke originally, then you transferred to Georgia. And you were so used to people approaching you from that point of view till when this person said about this particular program that you all were in, like, how'd you get in it? Your assumption was what? Because you thought I was just...
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And as it turns out, it just meant like, I was just wondering because I wanted to know how you heard about it and what made you decide you wanted to.
I remember now. Yeah.
And then you started.
It goes to trauma, though. I mean, it goes to trauma.
Yes.
Very much so.
And the people that look like him say those things and mean it in the way you took it. Versus this person, you know him from Adam, essentially saying to you years later, I really didn't mean it that way at all. What I meant, and I didn't even know I said anything wrong till I saw your face, but y'all didn't talk about it then. And he was like, I saw your face. And I knew at some point I wanted to be able to apologize to you.
Yeah.
But that's the importance of being balanced, which is, and I love it because you're so open and honest about, I'm not always balanced. I'm not always feeling balanced in my head. I have to process this a little bit to get to that point. But that was a perfect example of you reacting to that person based on a lifetime of how you'd been treated. It made perfect sense that you would do that. What we have to do is give the grace for understanding everybody didn't have our experience. That could mean something totally different to him. One of my favorite things is to say, so tell me what you mean by that.
Dude, you know what? I use that all the time. I learned that from Kirsten.
Yeah.
What do you mean? But I mean, to your point about that story, and I remember vividly now. I couldn't place it, but I remember even at Georgia, people asking, kind of making reference to, how you got into school. And I'd be quick to tell them my SAT score was probably higher than yours is if you really want to go there. But that was a defense mechanism.
Well, not only did you learn real quick, that made you the angry black man.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. And so where I'm going,
being honest, telling them.
And where I'm going with that, and I'm glad you said that, is that, there's a certain amount of trauma that many Black people have dealt with when it comes to things like intelligence, or in my case, that it was an intelligence thing. It was being offended because of being typecast or being degraded because I was a good athlete. I mean, all those sorts of things, they put you on a defense. But I think that we don't really recognize other people's trauma, not individually and not really collectively. One of the things that bothers me the most is, again, in the current narrative, even about things like reparations, or things like systemic injustice, a word that we talk about a lot, is that people are unwilling many times. White people are unwilling many times to listen to our history. And by history, I don't mean like 1619 or 1607. Like, I'm talking about 6 months ago. Like, I'm talking about the fact that we go to Thanksgiving with grandparents that lived through the things that they say don't matter anymore and were a long time ago.
Yes.
And it's like, I know them.
I know what matters too.
Like, even the things that many would say, like, that was in the past, we need to move on to the future, and I'm with it. These people are still alive.
Yeah.
Like, if he wasn't murdered, Dr. King would probably still be alive. Like these things weren't very, very long time.
I was at the March on Washington and heard his "I Have a Dream" speech.
Exactly. And so I think that has to be recognized by all parties, especially those who feel like that was the past. I mean, I'll just say this last piece. I'm gonna let you ask your question. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but we
love tangents. We do.
We're a very historical, as people, we should be historical people. God created us to remember history. He created us to celebrate landmarks and to celebrate great events that have happened in our personal history as well as our collective history. And in America, we do a great job of that with things like Independence Day. We talk about that. We are very, very quick to attach ourselves to the victories of people that we didn't know and had nothing to do with us when it's something positive. But as soon as it's something that makes us feel uncomfortable, then we don't need to talk about that history. It doesn't matter anymore. And so,
and then try to blame the children. That's the reason why we can't keep talking about it. Why we change whole history books and racism and all that, because the kids, they're feeling traumatized.
Yeah, and so I think that one of the starting points for all of this conversation is really just understanding as much as we can about our collective history in this country for all of us, so that we can reconcile where we are now. I mean, I think that feeds right into the DEI discussion.
Yeah. Oh,
that history feeds right into the reason why things
let
like.
me tell you what you said about that.
Oh, go ahead.
That's awesome. Yes. You said there's a feeling in America that everything is equal now, but Black people know in their bones that there's still a residue of neo-slavery that sticks to so much of life. Yes, today, 150, now 160 years after slavery, it's true that we're not as segregated as Black people were in Pop-Pop's day, but perhaps I should say not segregated in the same way. Mm-hmm. The impact is still there. You just can't sweep it under the rug. I'm sitting here. I was 13 years old by the time Jim Crow stopped, or at least they put the law in place, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And I'm still here, breathing, kicking, Okay. To have to forget all of that, or to think that and let's just take from 1619 to 1865, so that 247 years, and then the 160 from then until now just didn't exist. It took us 100 years, and you go through the whole timeline based on your family story. It took 99 years for them to go from slavery to the Civil Rights Act. And here we are 60 years later, and you're talking about how long this stuff takes and like, why is it still with us? Well, look how long that stuff was with y'all. Okay, it took you 99 years from slavery to end Jim Crow. And now 60 years later, a very short 60 years later, because we still have not gotten where we needed to go, you trying to put us back there? Mm-hmm. With segregated schools, taking money out of the public schools, putting it into private schools, which you know is going to eviscerate them, or taking money away from programs that are such a help for certain segments of the population that you know are going to subject them to having more health problems, more problems with stuff like hunger, taking food away from money away from stuff like SNAP. Those things are like a direct impact of that history. And at the same time, shutting down that history, taking out all sorts of books. Oprah, Jackie Robinson, come on. These people are just telling their life stories, but that's not okay to have in a library because it's somehow giving some sort of uncomfortable feeling to people that they don't want to have, or that this is a divisive concept, which is what the law that they do this under is based on, the idea that it's a divisive concept. Why is our history that actually happened a divisive concept? Especially when, like you said, we're still feeling the effects of it. So it's more than history. It's how history is impacted today.
And Mein Kampf is okay to keep around.
I'm sorry?
But Mein Kampf is okay to keep around.
Oh, yeah.
Even the font.
Yeah.
Even the font. That was
right.
Everything you just said is 100% true. And I think you started speaking about the fact that you're still here. You're a real life, like, Jim Crow survivor.
I never thought of myself that way, but yes, you're right.
Like it's something from a very, very long time ago. It's not something from a very, very long time ago. And so if we live in a country that for the majority of its existence codified humans owning other humans, codified an unjust legal system, codified unfair sentencing, lynching, the list goes on and on and on for most of its history. Why would we think that all that would be erased in such a small amount of time? It doesn't really make sense. So
it can't be erased. It can't be forgotten.
I think it's important for people of goodwill to, on all sides, from all complexions and all backgrounds, to say, we still have a long way to go. We can identify places where we've gotten better, but hey, let's keep on making this a more perfect union. There's nothing wrong with that. And as far as what's happening right now with President Trump, his administration, the beauty of our constitutional republic is that, things will change. Is that certain things will change. And so as much as, there are so many things that are difficult, I share many of the same frustrations that you do. I've gotten to a point, honestly, Dr. B.A., where I find myself not engaging as much because I'm getting angry. And it's not a righteous anger. Yep. It's a sadness. It's not a fear at all, but it's just there's a lot of animosity that has built, and it's not good for my spirit. To be quite honest with you. And so I don't feel as engaged, even politically or with the news, as much as I was when I wrote that. I was engaged. I was hopeful, all the social things. And now I just find myself getting very angry. And I'm a husband of 20 years. We just celebrated 20 years, and I'm a father. Congratulations. I need my energies in that space while still doing what I need to do and speaking out on these things. But I felt like I've had to protect. I think a lot of Black folks feel that way.
So important.
Protect a bit, because it hurts deep down when you see, your history, your parents, your grandparents, your greats being disregarded like it doesn't matter. Yeah. And you see the things that are important to you being disregarded. But in all that, there is there's going to be another. There's going to be, we get it every 4 years, and so then we'll have our problems with that one too. That's kind of where I am.
Benjamin.
The other part about this, before you move on to that, I want to go back a little bit. When we talk about trauma, I really want us to be real clear that trauma is not just something that happens to others. It happens to all of us. And so if any of us can just tap into whatever trauma is for us, and then multiply that out by how it has to do with, several hundreds, thousands of people and millions of people in this country. And just for things that had nothing to do with the people who are here today. The trauma has happened, sure, but the re-traumatizing is the problem. That's the part that's getting all of us pissed off. That's the part that's pissing me off. I don't know why we have to keep having this discussion about how much trauma you can deal with as far as I will let you, or how much I won't let you deal with, or as if it belongs to someone else to make that decision for us. It's actually a thing that all of us engage in, and most of the time we can't move ourselves out of it because we're not of the party that is being causing the trauma. We're being traumatized, so we can't do anything as an individual. No, as a group, we have a lot we can do. And I think that we need to start leaning that back more into that superpower we have as a people, because if people who lived during Jim Crow can make this move to civil rights and become, victorious in that, we're not in that right now. So we do have some things we can play. We just need everybody to be engaged, involved, and recognize what you can do to help move all of us out of this collective trauma. I don't think that we can actually, since this is now happening, what's happening is now happening, I don't think we can safely stay in our little corners anymore and say that this is what happens to them. Because actually what's happening to them is happening to you. It's just, you just don't know it yet. I know that I'm not being hunted down by ICE and asked for ID, but that doesn't mean tomorrow won't happen, because we've left it that wide open. So the people who need to be involved, to know how to, or I should say, maybe not you have to know how, but you should be somehow, some way taking a stand and being part of this. That helps lessen the trauma for all of us, because people who do take a stand, the people who do speak out, and I will give you my example for this, right as we speak today. I'm a Texan. I live in Texas. I'm sure everyone knows what's happening in Texas right now. And if you don't, I will let you know that our state has been asked by the President of the United States today, the United States to this day, to have us come and find 5 seats out of pulling it out of their behind to figure out how they can get the Republicans back in office come 2026 and 2028, or whatever that is, because we've been told that elections won't matter soon. Believe that when they tell you that. So look, our Texas Democrats decided to leave the state and deal with a lot of backlash from it, and a lot of, I guess what do you want to call it? A lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? They haven't just been threatened, but they have actually had legal force put in place here in the state that when they do come back, they'll be arrested right away. That's the game we're playing right now. This is really real. That is traumatic. It's causing me trauma every day here in the state because of what I know that means. As soon as it happens, it's over. And I need everyone to hear it. It's over. Because every other state will be asked to do the same. And if you don't comply, you will be given a lot of sanctions that you can't afford.
Which is why California, what they're doing about what Texas did, it becomes so important. Because they're pushing back and saying, you do that, then we're going to do it in California to counterbalance what it is that you're doing. You need somebody who pushes back like that. The thing that gets me about the trauma part, and this is part of what both of you talked about, is what is trauma for us, and our reaction to it ends up being somehow denigrated. I mean, think about the Boston Tea Party and why there is a United States of America. They didn't like what England was doing, ruling them from afar, taxation without representation, that sort of thing. Okay.
All right.
Look at what we're doing. And they ended up fighting a war years later, the Civil War, over the issue of slavery. All you did, Benjamin, was just say, no, I have an SAT score that qualifies me to be here. And all of a sudden you become an angry black male. When you have been traumatized your whole life by being looked at because of your physique, and the truth is because of your skin color, as somebody who didn't have a brain, you just had brawn. You could be okay on a field, but ain't nobody trying to ask you to think about something now. Okay, because that takes something you don't have. That trauma and your reaction to it, just saying that sentence, all of a sudden becomes something that you don't have permission to do, because that's going to make us uncomfortable. Then we're going to think of you as a angry black male, and we should, somehow do something about that. That is
so. You had a lot of history there, didn't you?
Yep.
I mean, you
had a lot of history with that.
Not even a way to deal with it. Even on the most basic level. Like you talk about Black history and teaching your kids, you shouldn't have to teach your kids that. I had to teach my kids that. It ought to be taught in school like anything else. But doing that all of a sudden becomes a divisive concept. It's history. It's history. Okay. And they're taken down even at places where this is what the place is about. They're taking down the placards about what it is, like in MLK's place, right? We're going to take down that because that's a divisive concept. Excuse me? Who would he be if he wasn't talking about civil rights? That's why this is a house that's run by the National Park Service, for Pete's sake. And you're going to take that down because it makes you uncomfortable, because you decide that that's divisive. Benjamin says his SAT score qualifies him to be here, and all of a sudden that becomes an angry black male. It's ridiculous. So not only trauma on somebody, you then give them no way of being able to react to it, which is sort of like when your mama spanked your butt and said, "Don't you cry." Like, what? You just beat my butt.
I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah, you haven't started crying yet. Yeah. And so you've gone to PWIs most of your, I guess, growing up, and your junior, and you going to university as well. I did the same thing. And so the trauma in that circumstance is way different, because I understood you. As soon as you said the person told you that's why he was wanted to know, how did you do this? All the same questions, always the same questions. And the reason why you reacted the way you did is because you're used to having the same question. Always questioning whether you know something, always wondering, well, how, if you do know, how do you know? Who was the great white hope that flew in and got you in line, got you on track, made things happen for you? These are the things that you learn, and these things always play in our head as we're growing up, going to school. Sorry about that.
And I think that's part of the also, like, so our oldest daughter is 16, and so we're entering that stage of life where we have a lot of friends who whose kids are going to colleges, and they're applying to colleges, and they all say, "Oh, Georgia is getting harder and harder to get into, or Florida is getting harder and harder to get into." Like, and I think that even in this academic space of admissions and DEI and quotas or opportunities, however that language goes, there's a lot of underlying, even with some people that we know, that are they, meaning us, like taking their kid's spot, when in reality the statistics show that it probably was just another white kid that took your kid's spot. It wasn't anybody.
What who says what does it take for you to think about that? How much does it take for you to think I have a spot at the top university in the state, when
there's only a few of those spots anyway?
You ain't got no guarantee of no spot.
But I think that sentiment, especially amongst just in this realm of admissions and college age kids and their parents, like that sentiment is being played upon,
passed
in order to roll back, or to to get rid of certain requirements that really, if we understood how they actually worked, I mean, quite honestly, the people that they were designed to work for, it doesn't work for them anyway.
Benjamin, that's my frustration, right?
Yeah, it ain't working for you anyway. But
it's like, this is not that. It's not what you think it is. That's not the way that works. And probably the biggest, and these misconceptions come from everywhere, but I will never forget being in a debate at the law school with the person who had been the attorney general, who had run for governor. And it was on affirmative action, which, talk about a setup. I mean, seriously. And it was standing room only. And I let him go first. And he gave all the usual stuff about, people taking jobs from people when they're not qualified and taking white men out of their jobs. Just nonsense that was absolutely illegal. And this is coming from the attorney general. And so when I got up, I said, I probably agree with probably 97% of what he said, but let me tell you the other part of it that makes a difference. And when I said, but let's start with the definition. Let's say what it is we're actually talking about. When he finished, clearly this standing room crowd was all over him. They loved him, absolutely believed in what he said. Mm-hmm. It changed as soon as I gave the definition. People were like, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And you could feel it. You could feel the change in the room. They had completely done a 180 and they were now fans of this. In fact, they were like, this is all we got? Affirmative action is all we can offer given what you're
is that debate on tape somewhere? Is it on YouTube?
I would have found it by now if I had been on there.
After it was over, and I thought about, one of the reasons I thought about this was because after we finished talking, and it was clear that there was a 180-degree turn, and I just gave the information. I don't care how you feel about it. You get to feel however you want to, but let's make sure we know what we're talking about here, right? This student gets up and says, anytime I see a white student, anytime I see a black person in a law class instead of a white person in that seat, as far as I'm concerned, they've taken that white person's seat. Mm-hmm. So that was so outrageous until I said, let me repeat this to make sure I understood.
When he talked, you understood why they would think that. Because if you jam those messages, then that's what people are going to think.
Which is why just giving the information of what it is, as opposed to what people think it is, like the people who are making those assumptions that you're talking about. Yeah. When you see what it is, it's like, it's totally different than what I thought it was. And here was the former attorney general spouting all of this crap that you could see was utter nonsense once you understood what it was. So when the student said this, I said, let me make sure I understand what you're saying, because it was basically the end of that sentence was, because it's so outrageous, I can't believe you said it. Mm-hmm. He said that, and I just sort of went, and I got ready to answer his question. Well, he saw my face and my reaction. He got so angry that he started screaming to me, Benjamin, you've been there at that university. Can you imagine somebody standing in a crowded room with me on the stage, and they're going to start screaming at me? I couldn't even believe it was happening. But one of my students saw it, started coming down the aisle, because if you thought you were going to do something to Dr. B.A., that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, you got nothing coming.
And the entire audience, if I hadn't believed it, I wouldn't have. If I hadn't seen it for myself, I wouldn't have believed it. The entire audience turned on that student who had made that statement and said, "What's wrong with you? Can't you tell that's not what this is about?" And that was an outrageous statement. I'm like, okay, aren't y'all the same people who 15 minutes ago thought that the Attorney General's assessment of what this was the best thing since sliced bread? But that to me showed you just how important information is. And we're an academic institution. Information is what we deal with. I want you to know that after that was over, the AG came up and asked me to come work for his law firm. And I thought he was joking. And he said, no, I'm real serious. He said, you would be devastating in the courtroom because you're so persuasive. And I said, I'm not trying to be persuasive. I just gave them information. I don't have a dog in that fight in terms of which side you come down on. I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And when I would do orientation, I would have to tell the students, because they all walked in there thinking exactly what you said. They've heard it their whole senior year as they're trying to get into school. And I would have to make this statement. I would say to them, did anybody get 1,600 on your SAT and you had nothing but a 4.0 or above? And of course, it would be, a lot of the people, but very few in the room, especially for the SAT score, right? Yes. And I'd say, now the way this works is there's certain of y'all that applied, you'll automatically admit. There's certain of you that applied, certain folks applied, you automatically not going to get in here, okay? The rest of you are somewhere in the middle, which is the most of you given raising your hand like that. Every single one of you can be in here. Whether you are or not doesn't matter as much as the fact that you're all qualified to be here. Yeah. So this whole nonsense about they got this position, they got in here because of a particular race, it's nonsense. That's all it is. It's nonsense. And even today, you have to deal with that with your daughter. It is amazing the difference between giving people accurate information and not.
Yeah. Well, that's why there's a fight that's ongoing and will be ongoing for information, for who controls it, what's available.
Yeah.
Even, you add in AI and social media, who controls those channels, who's able to correct algorithms so that we hear and see certain things. And so there's always a fight for the truth.
Isn't that scary? The thought that we have to fight just to see the truth?
It's super scary because entire wars have been fought over misinformation.
Yes.
And so that's why
Even in this country,
like people being vigilant, and trying to, because what happens many times, and you see it on the college campus, when you present people with accurate information, it's like the scales fall from their eye, the anger subsides a bit, and you can have a substantive conversation. And
we do that every day in class, or what? But
there's a hope there, but there's also a sadness there, because if you're not continuing to fight that fight, who is?
And the sadness that comes from, why didn't I know this before? Why didn't anybody tell me that? That's what would happen in employment law all the time. People would be like, okay, why didn't I know this? And it was like, you know what? You really need to think about that. Why didn't you know this? Because it was out there. I'm not bringing you anything that you couldn't have easily accessed on your own, or whoever was teaching your classes. Because they would say, like, I've taken all my history courses now, and I didn't know this. And I'm not digging for no history. I'm just giving you, and mine is just a little thumbnail. Like, why is it that we have this law? Let me back up so you understand why we have this law. Just a contextual kind of thing. And they're like, we didn't know. And it's like, that always tells me that you didn't know.
That's the point.
I think for you, probably the fact that you have children now is one thing for you to see your dad, because he had his issues, granddad had his issues, but now you got kids of your own, and we're still fighting some of these same fights. And in fact, in the last 3 or 4 years, as you've said, they've come up again in ways that we had not anticipated.
Yeah.
That makes it a whole different way.
We have some interesting conversations around the dinner table. We have a big circular table in our kitchen eating area, and we talk about a lot of stuff that's not, I guess, appropriate for the podcast. Stuff having to do with body parts and stuff like that with the little kids. But we also talk about larger issues, and I think that for Kirsten and I, while we have our personal feelings about the president right now, as well as the president in the past, we try to infuse in them a certain level of respect for the office, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
As much as we dislike many of the things that our current president says and things that he does, I think as parents you realize that even throughout our conversation, as we're talking about even the admissions thing and what incoming freshmen hear from their parents about who took their spot, as parents we can infuse certain feelings about entire groups of people into our kids by the way we talk about them, whether that be positive.
Even better when you look, when you're having conversations they're not even a part of.
Exactly. And so
they see your face when you're part.
I love to say that I do that well all the time, but I don't. It's a continual work.
Yeah, kids are great.
They are our biggest mirror. They are
great at picking it up.
Best sleuths. They are the best sleuths. So even as much as you are trying to be as careful as I'm sure you and your wife are, and even your teenage daughter, who has a lot more to add to the conversation, that she's 16. There's a lot that you try to keep along the wayside, but they pick it up. They get because they've learned you. They learn when you get excited and when you don't, when you want to talk low. They get all of that. One thing I want to ask you, Donnie, is you said that the kids at school came to your defense during that conversation about
affirmative action.
Affirmative action. Do you think that those kids would be able to do that today?
Yeah, I do. And I say that for 2 reasons. One, it's an academic institution. And I think context has a lot to do with it. It'd be different if we were at some show, on a stage somewhere. But I think that the other thing is you can't, to me, be in that environment and not respond to information, right? And people know when you've got a dog in that fight and this is really your opinion versus when you're just handing out information. And they on a lot of different levels. One, what your personal affect is, which is why I have to be so careful about that. 2, what it is you're saying. Go look up anything I'm telling you. It's out there, and it's from sources that you would trust. I think how this particular, like Benjamin, my granddaughter has just started her second year at UGA on Wednesday. I think for that group of people, that particular cohort, they are so much, a couple of things are going on. One, they've been acculturated a different way. You know, you can't underestimate the value of people like Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street. That's what they grew up with. So it's like everybody's supposed to be included. I don't understand what y'all got going on, but like, I didn't learn that. The other piece is, I think, because the music and the sort of social scene that they have been exposed to, even though it has a lot of negative stuff in it, it's been traditionally, over the past few years, more inclusive. And I think all of that forms who is sitting there listening to what it is I'm saying and how they're going to take it. Mm-hmm. So I think they would. Now, I also think that we're dealing with people who have grown up in certain areas. Geographic areas have an absolute impact on this. People who have grown up, think about this. When you're 18 years old in college, how much do you know about politics? That has not been the first thing on your mind. Yeah. The first thing on your mind has been who you're going to see this weekend, who you're trying to get with, what your clothes are. All of a sudden they get there, and in a political conversation, they're totally polarized. It's like, wait a minute, you don't even know anything about this. Where'd they get it from? They got it from their environment. Even if they weren't discussing it, people around them were discussing it and they heard it. And all of a sudden they get so wedded to it. And it's like, y'all don't even have a dog in this fight in terms of, you know, you're running, you're contributing, so you need to do what I want you to do. Where does that come from? And I think one of the things that I learned in dealing with those kinds of folks in class was information, even for them, ends up being totally transformative. And they would come back and say, this is not consistent with anything I knew growing up. And I was a lifelong Republican. My family was. But once I saw ABCD, it was like, I realized they were wrong. They were just wrong. And you know I'm not trying to get political up in there. I mean, that is totally your own stuff. You get to do that. I'm not trying to deal with that. I'm just trying to tell you the law and, you know, try to get you to think about it in a certain way so that it will be consistent and informed. Right. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, the transformations, and I think that's where your hope came in so accurately, Benjamin. That's part of what gives me hope. Mm-hmm. Because when you can get out there, which, Renee, is why we're doing the podcast, right? When you can get that out there, people can hear something that may not be consistent with what they've taken in before, it may well resonate with them in a way that just being in that echo chamber does not. Yeah. Benjamin, I have this question to ask you.
Dr. B.A., I got to go get the kids.
You got to cut? I love it. You have to go get the kids.
Yeah, well, I just put in, you guys not get my chat? I put in the chat to all y'all.
Oh,
I haven't been paying attention to it because I've been completely enamored by this.
Like I put it in like 5-10 minutes ago. And I was like, I gotta go.
Okay. So
okay.
Thank you. Nothing we have to say. Yes. Goodbye. Thank you, Benjamin.
But if you wanna like put a button on it, we can find another time just to like put a button on it.
Okay. All right.
Okay. That sounds good.
How about I wanted to ask you about was you talking about church being the most segregated time, and you talked about that was the one that could have the greatest impact. And I just had that conversation with my brother yesterday because he's getting ready to head up the organization of 500 ministers.
Do this. Let's do round 2.
Okay.
Okay. You want to do today, or you want to come back another time?
We got to do another time because I got that, then I got cross country practice, then I got all the things.
Benjamin, thank you for your time. Thank you for squeezing us in. Yeah. Please tell Kirsten. Tell Kirsten I said hi.
Schedule yourself back in, okay? All right. Thanks so much for everything. I'm going to send you the link again so you can schedule yourself back in.
Okay. All right.
Okay. When it's time for you, when you have time. Okay.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.